Hello, everybody. Welcome to Freedom Talk. I'm delighted to welcome my friend Sharleta Bassett here. She's running for U.S. Senate out of California, and I got the chance to visit with her and actually speak at one of her events earlier this month. Sharleta, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sharleta, I'm going to begin with a little video message that you sent me so people can get an idea of what you stand for.
All right, great. Thank you.
I want you to stand with me as a mom and a grandmother to be that front line once again for our kids. We can no longer sit back as we watch the children disappear into this nation. It is not about Republican, Democrat, Independent. I wish we had no titles. It's time to lose the titles. They're bad on every single side. It's time to start looking to the heart of man. We are going to honor our veterans again. We are not going to honor people that came to this nation to not find asylum. They came here for nefarious reasons. We have a White House that are trafficking children across the border. And what are we doing? We are afraid to step out? Well, I am not. Our own veterans have been so abused. We see these people come across the border and they're treated like royalty, and our veterans can't even get into a veterans hospital. That is a crime. The United States is not going to be lost to tyranny. We will refuse to give it to a corrupt White House. It is done. We are going to have God in the seat of the U.S. Senate in the state of California. Thank you, Jesus.
Makes me cry.
Thank you.
I'm not crying. My eyeballs are sweating. I was chopping onions. This is such a great message. And, it is despicable how they are putting illegal aliens in front of our veterans. We know that part of their plan is because the Democrats cheat, and this is another way of cheating. I'm also very concerned that military age men are coming over, and I know for a fact that the Chinese Communist Party and the PLA have, as part of their unrestricted war strategy, bringing in uncontrolled migration. It's a border invasion, not only bringing in fentanyl, human trafficking, but also I believe that they could be embedding people to make some major strikes in our country. So your message is so important, but you have a challenge in front of you because you have Adam Schiff that you're running against and others. And I know you've talked about how surprisingly, perhaps to some, you're getting a lot of pushback from the Republican Party. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Mitch McConnell is so dishonest. He touts how important it is to support the mothers and the parents of our nation, and that the mothers are the main demographic that he always wants to reach out to. He hasn't reached out to me. He hasn't reached out to a lot of women that are running for any seat, like Ceci Truman, and she's in Southern California, or Carrie Lake, or even Stephanie, she's running in Nevada for U.S. Senate. And he just doesn't care about us. He only cares about his position and title, and the fact that he is not even America first. It's just disgusting about what they're doing. They're so afraid of President Trump coming back and being held accountable for what they've done. They have really pushed back on anybody that stands boldly and says that I am 100% behind President Trump and Agenda 47.
Yeah, and Mitch McConnell is, no disrespect, but he's in really bad shape. I mean, he's had these moments where he's made Biden look like he's coherent, where he just freezes up and suddenly has to be let off, and then there's his wife who has business dealings with the CCP. The whole thing just stinks to high heaven. And I
Yeah,
think
let's
they're afraid.
follow the money.
Excuse me. I think they're afraid because they know that the Trump administration will come in and clean that all out.
Oh, absolutely. President Trump learned the hard way about who to trust and not trust. And Agenda 47, if people just want to even Google that, you'll see what he stands for when he gets back in office. And I believe 100% he will be voted in. They are trying to discredit anybody that has any morals or any standards for the American people. And they continually send our money off, as they did during the Super Bowl, to Ukraine. And we have open borders. We have Gavin Newsom that's letting it, going to provide 700,000 people with free medical. And our state is $145 billion in debt. It's just disgusting. It's like, where is this money coming from? And then I watched the debate the other night, and all the Democrats blamed everybody else except themselves, who created the problem, and acted like they could be the saviors and fix it. When they made it, they blamed the federal government for not getting enough money, and they blamed Washington, D.C. They didn't take any responsibility whatsoever for themselves and the liberal open border policies that they've had. And if they just wanted to shut the border, we would have a better school system for our children, because now we have so many children that speak so many different languages. Our teachers can't handle all of that. So our children are getting the bad end of the deal, as well as the people in housing. There's not enough housing, and our government's paying for that too.
You know, when I came down to speak at your event, which was fantastic, by the way,
It was fun.
Tina Peters was there, and let's see, gosh,
Tom Rentz.
Tom Rentz. Yeah, I really liked him. And then remind me the lady who spoke over the internet, or maybe it was a previous.
Oh, Donna Clement, Patricia.
Yes.
She's a dear friend. Yes.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event, but I think I told you that I got up that morning and went to the little hotel breakfast bar, and what should be the first thing I see on the television there but pencil neck Adam Schiff, and striking this pose and protecting democracy. And it was all geared toward Trump supposedly being an insurrectionist. And it's just amazing to me, because Adam Schiff has been caught in lie after lie. Mm-hmm. And now they're playing on this false idea that there was an insurrection. Do you believe that January 6th was an insurrection? Is Trump guilty of inciting insurrection?
Absolutely not. He said peaceably come to the Capitol so that we can talk. And peaceably, I mean, everything he said. I really believe the true insurrectionists are Pelosi, and Adam Schiff obviously has violated his oath of office, because he does not defend the American people against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He's violated his oath as an attorney, because he has no problem destroying evidence, because he was on the J6 committee and they destroyed so many documents. Why would they do that unless they had something to hide? To me, it's no better than bleach bit that Hillary loved to use, and beating up BlackBerry phones. Adam Schiff is a habitual liar. He lied about Russia collusion consistently. And Devin Nunes would just look at him like, you're nuts. We came out of the same meeting. And he purposely misinformed the American people. And when it came out that it was not true, he's never redacted one line, because he does it so well. And he does it without any kind of remorse. He doesn't care what kind of mental anguish he's causing the American people, because he really doesn't care about them at all. He cares about Adam.
Yeah. And it's a pattern, because all kinds of people lied to us about COVID. Yeah. Some of us knew this all along, that they were lying. I have a scientific background, so I knew very well when unscientific things were said. Excuse me. But they don't ever go back and say we lied.
No.
Very rarely, or if their feet are held to the fire, they're going to minimize it. And first of all, January 6th would have to be the first so-called insurrection in the world that didn't include firearms or any sort of weapons.
Yeah.
if Trump had meant to take over the government by force, that would have been a really pathetic effort. And you're right, he did call for peace. So we all know it's the equivalent of the Reichstag fire. It was a coordinated event. We know that FBI agents were embedded. We've seen Nancy Pelosi, some evidence that she orchestrated a lot of it.
Yes.
The Epic Times just came out with their second documentary on January 6th. David Summerall from Stop Hate and some others made a really good timeline of J6. And on the positive side, people are starting to see footage that was purposely kept from them.
Yes.
So it seems like the truth is coming out, and yet people are still, their eyes glaze over and when they hear the word insurrection. And, it's unreal.
It's word porn. That's what I call it. I call it word porn. They took people and pulled them over the railings, the police officers, the Capitol Police, and they mysteriously ended up quitting or losing their jobs. But they would pull innocent people that were praying, facing away from the guardrails. I met two of these people, and they're being tried for 50 years. And they were not even approached until a couple of years after it happened. But because they put their arms up to defend themselves from being hit in the face with a baton, they said that they were resisting arrest. And they're a husband and wife. They have a family. And we have political prisoners in the United States of America that have not received a fair trial. And some have committed suicide. And it's beyond disgrace. And if people don't realize that there's something different about the land of Washington, D.C., that we can't go in and rescue these people from our own government, there's something horribly, horribly wrong. And if they vote people in like Adam Schiff or Barbara Lee or any of these Democrats, even the Republicans, and I'm sorry to say, they're not up to date on anything. Steve Garvey, I'm sure, was a very nice man, but he does not have the spine or backbone to stand up to these lying people. And anyone that touts being a great friend of Maxine Waters, who is really an insurrectionist and wanted them to chase us out of restaurants.
You talk about inciting people to potential violence. And, there's another great documentary I have to recommend. It's Let My People Go by David Clement, which is also sponsored by Mike Lindell. Yeah. And it's just a great documentary. It's a little bit of a sleeper because I don't know how many people know about it. But there's this one scene in that documentary. By the way, David's a great friend. He's a former prosecutor, he's a lawyer in New Mexico. And there's a scene where they show that people would go to the gulag where these J6 prisoners were being held, oftentimes without any charges. They're just indefinitely holding them. And they would start singing the national anthem with them. Yeah. America the Beautiful as well, maybe other things. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what they did? They moved the prisoners from that corner so that they couldn't even have that little bit of consolation. It's despicable. I mean, this is Russian gulag level stuff. And it's lawfare. It's abusing the judicial system to use the law, to use the courts as a weapon against the opposition. It's political persecution.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran into that, Kelly John. People wouldn't sign my documents to file even to run for U.S. Senate because they were afraid that their name would get turned into the federal government, and for supporting a conservative to run for a seat that's been held by a Democrat for 30 years, they were fearful. So I had more Democrats sign for me to file than I did Republicans.
Yeah, and I've written a number of articles. You can find them on Gateway Pundit, on realfreedomtalk.com is where I house all of them, but Washington Times, other places, writing about the Chinese Communist Party and lawfare. Yeah. And what their strategy has been is to use our own legal system as a weapon of war. And one of the ways they did that is with school parents. I'm going to play just a quick little video here, and then maybe we can discuss that a bit.
Okay.
This Papa Bear is headed to Washington, D.C. next month to fight for all the parents targeted and persecuted simply for expressing concern for their kids. I'm bringing parental advocates and parents along as I present evidence and testimonies to members of Congress. Our goal is to get a committee hearing so that the perpetrators of this tyranny will be held responsible and we can finally get justice. Now, if you'd like to help, please go to realfreedomtalk.com/give or go to givesendgo.com/freedomtalk. Please help us go to DC and fight for all the parents and kids who've been targeted. So we know that the National School Board Association wrote a letter, sent it to Biden. I was going to say Mayorkas, but not Mayorkas. The DOJ.
Yeah.
Gosh, I have Mayorkas in my head, but
He's in my head too.
Yeah.
He should be tried for treason for going to San Vicente and helping with the CCP.
He is treasonous. And, this is a bit of a digression, but I talk to Border Patrol agents and they report to me and they've told me that he's given them unconstitutional orders, which is despicable. But so let's see. So this letter was sent to the DOJ, Merrick Garland. That's the name I'm looking for, and to Biden from the National School Board Association, accusing parents of being hostile and violent and asking federal resources to be devoted to this. So Garland turned around on October 4th, 2021, and issued a memo dedicating Patriot Act resources, calling parents domestic terrorists. 10 days later, 14 attorneys general called this a massive fraud on the American people. And this is one of those instances where at first they doubled down, but then Jim Jordan and some other congressmen, the select subcommittee on the weaponization of the U.S. government, cried foul, and they ended up having to backtrack that and having to say, yeah, we apologize. This was overblown. It was harsh language. And yet they haven't apologized to people. And Sharleta, I'm finding out more and more stories of people who were persecuted, put into jail, hiding for fear of their lives because now they've got this woke mob after them simply for expressing concern about their children. And because this hasn't been made right, this is still going on. This is one of the members of Dad Army. He goes by Ben Richards. He's a Navy SEAL, I believe, if I'm getting that right. And he's being pressured. People are trying to get him court-martialed, all sorts of things, simply because he's speaking out on behalf of parents. I mean, you must see this too. What can we do about this if you're in the Senate? What can we do to make this right for parents who've been
One of the things that's super important to me is removing the U.S. Department of Education out to get them out of the picture. I believe that the school systems should be in the district of that school and not even in the county of that school, in the district, because a man I spoke with in Southern California had a really good point. LA is so huge. They have, if we did it in the county, there would be half liberal side of a school system and then half red that are very conservative families. So we have to do it per district is a bill that I would want to pass and put all of the resources to that district that the state normally would be allocating to just basically the school system of that state. And the reason I say that is because the topography of California is so vast. People just think that it's one big beach, and it's not. We have amazing mountains and snow skiing and water skiing, and then we can get to the ocean, and then we have hunting and all kinds of things. But because of the topography and the difference in voting and the difference in the moral standards, basically in the rural areas, we need to return the control to the parents so that they have more control over the school board and they work for us. And I'm so tired of seeing the people not understand that our own tax dollars are being used against us as a weapon. So every time they make a special counsel, it's our dollars that are paying for that special counsel, just like the Mueller ridiculous investigation that spent $33 million or whatever it was. It's sickening. It's sickening. But my thought was that we get a bill so that at the beginning, I would have to be per diem, that the parents would be getting money because if they wanted to send their child to a charter school or a private school, because of the Biden disgusting administration that has broke everybody and now our credit card debt is so high, the parents would need money to be able to put their children in the school of their choice. And the kids would have to, of course, attend school and be paid per diem because a lot of parents aren't really good with handling money. Some people aren't. But then after that third year, after President Trump's been in for 3 years, that fourth year we would do a tax credit, and so that they would have time to have President Trump bring back the economy and have some money so that they're able to provide the money to pay for their kids' schooling, and then after that it would be a tax credit on the fourth year.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And, as you know, I quoted you in an article that I wrote for George Magazine.
Yeah,
How the targeting of, yeah, absolutely. It's a great quote. How the targeting of parents will affect the 2024 elections.
Yes.
And speaking of a bill, there was an amendment to H.R. 5, and the title of it was Expressing the Sense of Congress that the Department of Education should be terminated. Mm-hmm. This is part 2 in an article series. Part 1, which I published, it's on realfreedomtalk.com, it's on joehoff.com, it's going other places. But I looked at the performance of, excuse me, Arizona's Republican congressmen, and all of them got high marks except Juan Ciscomani, and he voted no on this amendment. And I think that was one of the reasons why, where the other members of the House got A's and B's, Juan scored an overall D. So I want to read you. This is part 2 in the series, which I haven't even published yet, but I wanted to read just a little bit about this attempt to at least express that the Department of Education should be terminated. Ciscomani voted no on an amendment offered by Representative Thomas Massey that would express the sense of Congress that the Department of Education should be terminated. This decision put Ciscomani in direct conflict with the national movement of mama bears and papa bears, influencers and members of the public who've had enough of public government overreach in education. Former Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, who was Secretary of Education under Trump, echoed the strong sentiments of many conservative parents and parental group activists in a keynote speech at a Moms for Liberty summit in July 2022 in Tampa, Florida. She said, "I personally think the Department of Education should not exist," which is interesting coming from a Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
So critics of the Department of Education have cited damaging coronavirus-related mandates and progressive curriculums like CRT and gender theory as reasons why the Department of Education needs to be abolished, leaving education decisions in the hands of local school boards. Now, we see this really ramped up in California to the point where they are they're eroding quickly parental rights. They want the state to make the decisions. As I understand it now, if a child expresses some so-called gender confusion, the teachers can counsel them without even notifying the parents. And I know there's one, Adam Vena, who's a California parent who went through divorce. His ex is trying to turn their little boy into supposedly a girl. Yeah. The little boy doesn't even want it. Yeah. And yet California has a judge there put a restraining order on the father so that he can't even have access to his own son because he's supposedly not affirming the gender. Are we at the point of no return in California? How do we get over this?
No, it's pure evil. We are not dealing with politics anymore. They're trying to wipe out the generation that our children will be when they grow up. And I say that because I've had children of my own, and I know what it means to carry life inside my own womb. And to try to physically change a young human being when they don't even understand what kind of cereal they want in the morning, and they argue over the silliest things, and then you're trying to cut off their body parts and change the fact that they would not be able to have life beyond themselves. Who would ever do that to a human being? Number one, most people don't even want to do it to their pets, but yet they want to take this and go to the extreme and say that they have full control over this child. It's one world government. They want to bring us to our knees, and they know that if they're able to take captive the children, then they can cripple the parent, because it breaks their heart to the point that they don't know what else to do. They're fighting a battle against the government that is turned against us. So all three branches of government, I believe, have turned against the American people, and they've been utilized as a weapon by the Biden administration, the Department of Defense, including all three letter agencies, against us parents, because they want to have full control over us. And we have got to rise up. I believe any parent doing that to a child should be considered a abusive parent. I
Yeah.
do not believe that that is moral in any way. And the long-term effects, you see so many people that have regretted what has happened to their bodies, and they speak out often because you start giving them hormones and their body stops growing. It causes so many health issues later in life. And just as a woman, I would not recommend giving a boy hormones,
No.
because it's not only emotionally just a problem, because even as a woman, sometimes you don't know why you're crying. You just cry, and it sucks sometimes. And why would I do that to a child
Yeah.
that's already going through changes inside their little bodies as they're growing? It's just horrific. It's an evil, and we have got to stand up and fight against it for all we're worth,
Yes,
and
we
get
do.
people in Congress and in the Senate and in the lower branches of government, in our city councils, school boards, get them out if they're doing these things. And we really need to be able to have control over the teachers that are willing to jeopardize the life of a child that they're never going to have any contact with later in life. They're not going to be able to fix their brokenness. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the advocates of this actually use doublespeak, and they say
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of the truth. So they talk about,
Yes.
if you don't give hormone blockers to these kids, if you don't allow these radical surgeries, you're not affirming their gender. Well, what could be less gender affirming than to tell a
Yeah.
girl who's maybe more of a tomboy, you're not okay, you need body parts added or cut off, or a boy who's maybe a little more effeminate, yeah, you're not okay in the body that you have. What's less affirming than that?
Yeah.
And I was watching American Thought Leaders with Jan Jekielek, and this guy Billboard Chris was on there, and he brought up something that I had never thought of. He said, so many of these kids who took hormone blockers, who had the surgeries, they're finding out now that many, if not most of them, can't even have orgasms. So you're taking
Yeah.
a child and taking away one of the biggest physical pleasures in life, spiritual
Right.
pleasures as well. And you're
Yes.
saying you're not even old enough to make a decision, and yet we're gonna block your puberty. We're gonna block the natural order of things. And then people like Chloe Cole and increasingly more and more
Yes.
are going down the road and saying, I hate that they did this to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lawsuits now. I mean, this shouldn't be a political issue left and right. It should
No.
be every parent, everybody who cares about kids saying, enough of this. This is brutality.
They've lost their freaking minds.
Yes, they have.
They have fallen into a state of depravity that just reminds me of Sodom and Gomorrah. They are so brainwashed, and they twist their words to make you feel like you're the one that's the perpetrator, when you're really the victim, and they're making the child the pawn. And it's so disgraceful. We have got to end it by voting, voting, voting. And the American church right now, there's 50% of the church that does not vote, and they don't want anything to do with politics. Why tell those churches that, if they even hear this,
Yeah.
you need to start being the salt and light of the earth, because that's what God called you to do. And if you don't, you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah. And
You're part of the problem.
there's a book
because
that
you
every
just stand up.
there's a book that every Christian needs to read. It's by Eric Metaxas. It's called Letter to the American Church. And they
Yes.
just came out with an excellent documentary. I watched it the other night. And actually, Eric is going to come on the show soon. The producer, Simone, of the movie's going to come on the show. And, it's so powerful, Sharleta, because Eric is talking about, and he brings on people like John Amonchukwu, who's been very involved in exposing these terrible sex ed books in the
Yes.
schools that the board members try to shut him down from reading the books that they present to our kids, right?
Out loud. Yeah. Because they're
But
embarrassed.
the main thrust of Eric's point in Letter to the American Church, is that what happened in Germany is very much happening here. And he
Yes.
cites Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's just a theological giant in the Christian world. And some 18,000 churches existed in Germany at the time that Hitler was on the rise. And about 3,000 signed a pact, I forget the name of it, but that they were going to stand up against the Nazi regime. about
Right.
3,000 just went in lockstep with
Yeah.
the Nazis. You can see pictures of Hitler talking to priests and things.
Yeah.
But the vast majority, like some 12,000, just went along to get along. They didn't say anything. And I hear these excuses today. Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago said something along the lines of, everyone has a dozen glib little reasons for not getting involved. And so Christians say things like, well, Romans 13, we're supposed to respect the governing authorities. They handpick a few scriptures that are taken way out of context.
Yes.
Completely dismiss scriptures like we ought to obey God rather than men. And they use it to do the same thing that led to the rise of Hitler. And Eric Metaxas makes the point, if even half of these churches had stood up, we might not have had the rise of Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And yet, what would you say to a Christian today who says, well, Joe Biden's terrible, all these people in his administration are doing terrible things, but God allowed it, so we need to submit to it. What would you say to Christians like that?
I would say wake up, first of all, and read the Bible. At what point do we watch crimes against humanity happen and say, God, let it happen? No, they chose to do nothing and let it happen. That's why I'm running. I'm running because I'm tired of watching people be fearful and blame it on God when they have no faith in God to know that they have the strength in Him to stand up against tyranny. And that's exactly what it is. It is just an excuse to do nothing. Yeah. And like I said, you're going to either be the salt of the earth or you're not. And God is separating the wheat from the chaff right now. And if you do not humble yourself and understand that you're part of the problem and pray and ask God to forgive you because of how our country is. I've had to do it myself, and I do it often, because if I can't see myself for who I am, how am I supposed to help anyone else? We humble ourselves, and then we can help others, and we stay humble. We have to. And the love of each other, the love of mankind should give you enough incentive without having to make excuses like the Democrats do. And even so many Republicans, they make excuses for their bad actions, and they need to own those. And I'm willing to stand in the deep of this mess and protect our babies and protect our vets and restore honor where honor's due, and be a vote for President Trump and have some strength and integrity. And it's a servant seat. It's not a seat for a title. And everyone thinks that a Democrat's supposed to have that because they owned it for 30 years. It's not a seat to be owned. It's not supposed to be owned by a Republican or a Democrat. And that's what the GOP seems to be leaning to. They put somebody at the top that they're all debating because they have a bigger bank account. They have no morals. They have no idea what's going on in our country, and I do. And I will stand up fearlessly because I'm not afraid of them or the ones that are demon possessed and do not care about morality, humanity, or anything else. I will shut them down. Yeah. And I cannot wait to be the first one to use the gel on the bottom of the Capitol. I'm serious. I am so mad at them.
Oh, me too. And, look at Nikki Haley courting the Democrats, spitting out vitriol against Trump and people who follow him. These people are truly Republicans in name only. And we as concerned parents, those of us who see what's going on, we have to repudiate that. We have to push back and say, I think it was Tom Renz said in his speech out there in Sacramento, get the hell out of our party if you're not going to stand up to this stuff.
Yeah, get out of our party. Seriously. He said a lot more things, but the thing is that Adam Schiff signed up as an independent. Adam Schiff doesn't live in California. We all know that. He hasn't lived here for a long time. He does have a small place in Berkeley, and I know that there's a lawsuit going on with that, so go ahead and fact check. And he has a lot of other lawsuits against him that are disgraceful.
These people think that they truly, again, it's a doublespeak. No one's above the law, and yet that's where they operate all the time. The Hawaii Supreme Court saying, well, the Second Amendment goes against the spirit of aloha. No, we don't make our decisions that way. I wanted to say really quickly regarding this war on children and a lot of the things we're talking about and regarding the church, it's shocking how many people in the American church are either knowingly, purposely going along with Marxism and communism,
Yeah.
or they are sympathizers who understand it and maybe don't take a hard line, but they're accepting it. And then there are the people called the dupes. The communists use this term, the dupes. And I've learned this from Julie Bieling's book, Beneath Sheep's Clothing, which is a fantastic book, also coming out as a documentary. But what shocked me, Sharleta, is that the U.S. Communist Party deliberately set out to infiltrate American churches. I'm going to read a little quote, because if you go to @RealFreedomTalk on Instagram or Twitter, that's where I do some conversations with people. But I posted a picture of this foot washing commercial during the Super Bowl, and I examined it theologically. I actually have a bachelor's degree in theology.
Yeah.
And most people were like, yeah, there's something wrong with that. But some came back and tried to speak against that. So I'm trying to educate people and say, look, what they're doing is playing on your sympathies, playing on your best nature.
Look at the whole picture.
Yes. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about that, about how Hitler used the goodwill and the collective benevolence of the German community against them. So I'm going to read this little quote. So I said to this person who is trying to defend these commercials, the planned infiltration of communism into the American church is well documented. Bieling writes, beginning in the 1930s, the U.S. Communist Party began asking members to rejoin their religions of origin to infiltrate the churches as lay people. In 2005, the Communist Party of the U.S. organized its, quote, religious commission and held a conference for party members who also participated actively in churches. Walter Rauschenbach was a socialist and highly influential clergyman in America who, beginning in 1885, upon graduating from the Rochester Theological Seminary, began promoting the so-called social gospel. I mean, I think that sounds familiar. He had connections with England's Fabian socialists and traveled to England to meet with some of them in person in 1907. Fabian socialists advocated for transforming society through propaganda and infiltration of societal institutions, including churches. Now, this is crazy, Charlotte. Listen to this. Their symbol was a wolf in sheep's clothing. You can look it up. You can see it, the Fabian Society. In his seminal book, A Theology for Social Gospel, Rauschenbach, who's known as the greatest single influence on the life and thought of the American church in the first half of the 20th century, made the claim that socialism is the end goal of Christianity. Rauschenbach maintained that Jesus didn't die for the sins of man, but for the sins of social injustice. One must shift their focus away from concerns of sin or redemption to simply doing good deeds and lifting the burdens from the poor and oppressed, creating a sort of socialist heaven on earth.
Wow.
I said all of this is back in the form of critical race theory, Black liberation theology, and social justice. So again, we have half-truths. Of course we care about the poor. Of course we care about the oppressed. You know, largely racial prejudice in this country, that we've made huge strides in it. I think Barack Obama brought a lot of this back. The communists are pitting the races against one another. But while there is some discrimination going on, what I see is most people on the street, no matter their color, they get along.
Yes.
So I'm trying so very hard to help Christians understand, look, they are playing on your sympathies.
Yes. Yeah. The part that blows my mind is they try to say that they have so much humanity, but yet, and they want to make sure that the people that are crossing the border have good asylum. Well, what about the ones that were brought to that border against their will and were raped? And where did they go? And why are their panties hanging in a tree called a rape tree? Where are those babies? Where are those women that's clothes are hanging in that tree? What about the people that drowned? I haven't heard one thing. That's one thing Tom Rentz taught me. He said, you stay on the offensive. You do not go off of it, because we don't have deep pockets like the deep state does. They can continue to use our own dollars against us, but we will stay on the offensive and say, why are you okay with rape trees? Why are you okay with innocent babies being brought across with Chinese Communist Party? Why are you okay with these people coming across that have that, and Biden saying no more DNA tests.
Yeah.
And why are they not doing rape test kits on these children anymore that have 30 different men's DNA in them? I am 100% behind President Trump's Agenda 47 to make trafficking a death penalty sentence, because I have no sympathy for people that hurt the innocent. It's just outrageous, and I'm so beyond the point of them using my integrity against me. They need to know that my integrity will be a strong shield against their lies, and it will also be a strong force for the American people to remember that being a Christian doesn't mean you're a doormat. It means you stand up for righteousness and justice. We have a God of justice, and I stand on that word. And that does not mean that I am a pushover. That means don't mess with me, because I know where I stand.
Yeah, exactly. And, Julie Beeling in Beneath Sheep's Clothing talks about the prison of two ideas. It's a communist concept where they say, either you support, either you support our agenda or you're a bad person. There's nothing in between.
No.
And you can look at Unrestricted Warfare, which is the People's Liberation Army handbook written by two Chinese colonels. Yep. And you can see in there, where they talk about unrestrained border crossings as a weapon of war. They're not doing it out of the benevolence of their hearts. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the American communist movement how they've wanted to use that as well. So they're essentially, you're right. I mean, this is not good for the migrants, because, and I lived on the border for 5 years. For Pete's sake, more than half a lifetime ago, I was a bilingual grade school teacher on the border of El Paso and Juarez. I speak Spanish. I know Border Patrol people, and I've worked for organizations that are run by Chinese dissidents who understand the goals of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes.
So I try to tell people, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I know what I'm talking about. And people who come on and think that their opinions or feelings are going to be fact, they're the dupes. They're falling for it. You can, if you take the emotion out of it and really look at this and look at what people have said, look at their agendas, you start to understand what's going on. I want to read this Bonhoeffer quote real quick. Bonhoeffer, by the way, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, was executed by the Nazis because of his opposition to the Nazi Party. The German has kept his freedom by seeking deliverance from self-will through service to the community. And that could be said of Americans right now who are falling for this social justice gospel. Mm-hmm. He wrote this from a Nazi prison cell. But in this, he misjudged the world. He did not realize that his submissiveness and self-sacrifice could be exploited for evil ends. Civil courage can grow only out of the free responsibility of free men. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, 1906 to 1945, in Letters and Papers from Prison. Wow. This is the hard thing, Sharleta, because you come in and you say, look, we've got to put a stop to this. We've got to get back to regulated immigration, legal immigration. And people are going to say, you're just a big meanie. You're a racist. How do you respond to that when people say you're a racist? You don't like brown and black people coming into this country?
I would say you don't like brown and black people either, because you guys are all for abortion, and the most children that are aborted are black, beautiful, beautiful black babies. Yeah. Obama did less for the black community than any president in history. What a stinking joke. I cannot stand the fact that people are too afraid to be called names because they don't want to get their feelings hurt. Well, my feelings are not going to be hurt if they call me a racist, because I will hug every single person that is any other nationality and love them like a human being before any one of those would do it, because they really don't care about anyone but themselves. Yeah. And I'm just not afraid. I am so over their double speak and their lies. They say to believe what they say, but not what you see. And I see everything that's going on and watch what they say, and it's all flat out lies. And I believe the media needs to be held accountable. I think that they need to have the pantsuit off of them, and they need to be taken apart, because they do not speak the truth. They all say the same talking points, And Fox News is just a joke too. I mean, there's a couple people on there that I think are good people, but they still follow their producer and they don't man up and just say the truth. And I mean, thank God Tucker got away. There's very few on there, you know. It's just so sad because they will end up doing the same thing that they did again in 2020 and be election deniers or whatever, because we know good and well that there was fraud, and more of that's coming out. And I cannot wait until people wake up. And, you know, Kelly John, it's so sad when you can relate our lives that we're living right now to movies. I really feel like we're in the Hunger Games and they're trying to separate us into our districts with their 15-minute cities. And the Nazis they took the children away first because they knew if they could control the children, they could control the parents, because the parents would do anything to get their babies back. And we are back at that point, and people need to stand up and wake up and vote. And the church needs to rise up and vote and start remembering the power and the authority that we have in Jesus. And if we don't, our nation will be lost.
Yeah. And, you know, these lies are sort of like mud that's smeared on a window. It's a thin layer keeping you from seeing the truth. And, you know, along those lines, I think a lot of people don't understand that Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, Hitler was a great fan of hers. And she was into eugenics. This is a quote that's verified. She said, "The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We do not want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to anyone or of their more rebellious members." I mean, this is shocking. And you're seeing this today because, you know, Larry Elder, anyone who's black and a conservative, well, you're the black face of white supremacy. Look, we know what their plan is. Would people please stop falling for it? Would you please engage your brains? We have this emotional intelligence, and I see that you have this, because there have been experiments where maybe people who had a part of their brain damage where they couldn't feel emotions. They were not capable of thought, because we have to use left and right brains. Emotions are part of thinking, but the problem is that some people only use that right brain. They feel. It's a postmodern world where what I feel must be true. But set that aside for a moment and do some homework. Look at these agendas, because you've got to understand, at least in theory, that the same people who brought fascism, communism, all the democide of the 20th century that killed over 100 million people, they have an agenda, and they're not going to come in looking evil. They're not going to be like the Nazis on the, say, the Indiana Jones movies. They're going to come in like angels of light, like we love
like
you.
Satan. Satan was the most beautiful angel, and he was so prideful. That's how come he got kicked out of heaven. He thought he should be a god. And that's why he hates us so much. We were created in the image of God. But they come in kindly, and they come in with rewards, like they did with the jab. They were rewarding people for taking it. And then after people didn't get the rewards, they didn't want to get it anymore. And so then they started saying it's mandated, and a mandate isn't a law. And people have forgotten their constitutional rights. If people have the right to choose for their bodies, why don't we have the right, the freedom of choosing what goes in it? And that is something that I am firmly for too. We need to have the freedom to put shots in us if we want. You shouldn't have to have shots to go to school. The babies, I think there's a number like 60 something shots by the time a child is in 8th grade that they've had to have just to go to school.
Yeah. Well, you know, unfortunately, I'm running up against the time limit because I have another interview coming up. I want to play my endorsement of you. And like I was telling you, tongue in cheek, you know, you got General Flynn endorsing you and Roger Stone and these others. You know, that's pretty cool, but you're in the big time now. Hey, everybody, this is Kelly Walker from realfreedomtalk.com. I'm a journalist, a writer, an author, and a contributor to the Epic Times. You can find my work in Gateway Pundit, Washington Times, Town Hall, and other fine publications. And I'm very, very happy to endorse my friend Sharleta Bassett for the U.S. Senate representing California. Sharleta has a heart for the people. She also has the mind and the skills to perform the duty very, very well for the American people. We certainly don't need more career politicians in Washington. We need people who understand how we feel, who understand the challenges that we face. And Sharleta is one of those people. She's been a great friend to me. She's been very helpful in our times of struggle, and I can't recommend her highly enough. Sharleta for U.S. Senate representing California in 2024.
I love you, Kelly John. Okay, you guys can all play Who's the Best video.
I'm joking. I'll play
oh no, you're all awesome. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Kelly John.
Yeah, thank you so much for your support. You know, we are in a war. As you know, I've been arrested twice. My family and I have been persecuted and hounded, and I'm really looking forward to this Washington, D.C. trip. We're going to hold some of these people responsible for the horrendous way they've treated their own countrymen, treated parents. But you've been so encouraging to me, and I appreciate that. And I think, you know, that's something that's important in our elected leaders and our politicians, is that they have that realness. They don't get to this place, you know, that they remember their servants. They're supposed to be public servants. And you have that heart. Tell our followers, Sharleta, where they can go, how they can support you, where they can visit you online.
We would love if anyone can donate just even $1. We know people are struggling under this economy, and they do add up. But my website is www.sharleta, SHARLETA, Bassett, BASSETT.com. And go on there and be encouraged and listen to some of the podcasts like I have with Kelly. And just learn. You need to look into things and learn, and just know that you're so important and you have more power than you think that you do. If you just rise up and just stand in your local community and be that neighbor that someone needs to know that they're not alone anymore. Just like Kelly John and I, we're great friends because we support each other, just because of our feelings of justice that needs to be served, and because of our love of the children and of this nation. And I just ask you to rise up and have no fear and have faith.
Absolutely. Well, Sharleta, thank you. I'm sure we'll have you back again, and, you know, keep fighting the good fight. And I hope that everyone who's watching our show or listening will go to sharletabassett.com and give you all the support they can.
Thank you, and have a safe trip to DC. I'm excited for you.
All right. I'll fill you in on all the news.
Okay.
As we storm the Capitol, but
with words.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Dangerous.
All right. Love you.
All right. Love you too. See ya.
Bye.